In the past, when Konami developed a retrained deck of sorts, the only response from the Yu-Gi-Oh community was a general groan and, in a sense, sad lament that the card space in the given set could have been better used to support existing archetypes. However, over the last year or so, Konami has actually done a rather effective job at making retrained archetypes, or at least archetype spin-offs, so to speak, more playable. Spiral, the Mythic Radiance dragon, is a retrain of Spiral Serpent. So is Konami going to maintain their somewhat hot streak with retrains when they release this card later in the year? Starting with the Mythic Direct support, there is nothing much to say about the Spiral retrain himself, for his characteristics are just a carbon copy of Spiral Serpent, with the exception of Spiral Mythic now being a worm instead of a sea serpent. Outside of that, he is a level 8 normal monster with 2900 attack and a 2900 body. By himself, he's nothing to write home about. But when combined with his support, that's a different story. However, due to the way his support interacts with him, most of the time when you're summoning this guy, it'll either be from deck or graveyard, so drawing him is somewhat frowned upon, so I like running 2 copies, because you do need that second copy just in case one copy gets DD-crowed or something. Spiral Wave is the best equipped spell when the tempo of the duel is in grind or control mode, for it produces a very high probability that your opponent is going to lose a card from the hand because of the battle destruction protection portion of the effect. Equip this to a normal monster, swing away at anything, either directly or a monster that will not destroy the attacker via some effect, and at the end of the battle phase, summon Spiral from the deck, hand, or graveyard, and then equip this card to it, and finally your opponent has to discard a card from the hand. Now, while the opponent gets to choose the discarded card, most of the time this discard will still be a net negative for the opponent. One glaring difference between Spiral Wave and the other 2 equips is that Spiral is not summoned until after the battle phase ends, so it will not be able to attack during the given turn. I view Spiral Crash as the worst of the 3 equips, because I have little respect for both flat position switching, where the card is not flipped face down, and piercing. The only real advantage to this card is the ability to summon a Spiral without having to destroy a monster by battle, only having to do damage, so you can attack directly. This advantage comes into play when clearing the field with a Whirlpool or some other card effect. Overall, I run 0 copies, even though it's still highly searchable, but I can understand why someone may run 1 copy. I just think Hold's a better card. Speaking of Spiral Hold, it's definitely a quality card for the deck, and different from Wave is that it's the equip you want to grab when you're going for that OTK. Hold's 500 attack increase is nice for getting over common XZ and synchro plays, and its transfer technique burns the opponent for 1000 damage, in addition to making the newly summoned Spiral a 3400 attack. Hold adds an additional 2000 damage versus Crash from the original plus 500 attack for the first equipped monster, the 1000 burn damage, and the second plus 500 attack for the equipped Spiral Mythic. I run 2 copies of Hold because I place more value on the 500 attack, helping getting over monsters, and to some smaller extent the burn damage, than the piercing ability possessed by Crash. Time to discuss the best archetype-specific field spell in the game, Pacifis, City of Mythic Radiance. This deck really only works when Mythic Radiance is on the field, otherwise the spiral aspect of the deck is rather bad, so why is Mythic Radiance so good? Well, it is fantastic at producing field control, for whenever the opponent activates an effect, it summons a level 8, 2000 attack, 2000 defense water worm token that has no restrictions on its use or attacking capacity. When you are not already controlling a token, this effect makes it rather difficult for the opponent to make progress with removal-based card effects. The other effect allows for a once per turn search of any Mythic Radiance Dragon card from the deck when a normal monster is summoned or special summoned, and this includes the token that this card summons with its other effect. This search effect is somewhat ridiculous when considering the power and usefulness of the cards it can search. The Umi standing, of course, is important for some of those search targets, and can be important if you want to put in some old school, if Umi is on the field, support cards, but in my experience, those support cards just aren't good enough in the modern game. It is worth noting that you can search for Spiral Mythic, but unless you're running a deck that uses trade-in, I would highly recommend never adding Spiral Mythic to the hand. Overall, the Spiral portion of the deck is a pain in the butt for the opponent to deal with when Mythic Radiance is on the field, and ho-hum when it's not. Run 3 copies always. Clashing Whirlpool is definitely the best trap so far from the Spiral Mythic support in my opinion. Even when not considering its hand trap standing, the ability to destroy any card on the opponent's field, monster, spell, trap, face up, face down, at no cost, with only the simple and easily achievable condition of only controlling normal monsters and controlling at least one. However, when considering the hand trap aspect of this card, that it can be activated during either player's turn from the hand when Umi is face up on the field, which is dealt with by the field spell, it becomes ridiculously useful as a searchable interrupter. Its banish from the graveyard effect is not great, but can be useful for reapplying an equip spell from a spiral to another normal monster in effort to summon the second spiral. Overall, Clashing Whirlpool is really what pushes Mythic Radiance from a high-quality field spell to a almost are-you-kidding-me field spell. Run 3 copies. While Deep Whirlpool is not as good as Clashing, it is still quality and can lead your opponent to have some psychological fits, let's say, for its ability to reduce attack points and its ability to be activated during the damage step from your hand during the opponent's turn. Its breakthrough skill aspect is also quality at snuffing out your opponent's plays, especially because of that hand activation aspect it has when conditions are met, because your opponent can't just simply get rid of it with the Twin Twister before trying to make their plays. In contrast to Clashing, Deep's banish from the graveyard effect is frequently useful for increasing the efficiency of Spiral Mythic summoning by bringing out a hold or wave from the graveyard to attach to an appropriate target. I run 2 copies of Deep Whirlpool. Celestial is one of those cutesy trap cards that is a lot more trouble than it's worth, and smart players just stay the heck away from. While its banish effect does provide some level of protection, this deck can nuke opponent life points much more efficiently than having a single monster sit on the field and kill 3 effect monsters. 0 copies. While the existing support is generally high quality, obviously there is not enough Spiral Mythic support to field a complete deck, so there is a need to hybridize. What are the best options for hybridizing? You could go with Gemini monsters, for they have an advantage of useful secondary effects, and Gemini Spark being a high quality card, but they struggle overall because Geminis are slow without catalytic field, and that obviously competes with Mythic Radiance, in addition to Geminis typically having too little attack power relative to other normal monster choices. Normal pendulums are definitely an understandable and popular choice. The power of the pendulum mechanic, along with the excellent pendulum effects associated with Sky Dragoons of Draconia and Dragoons of Draconia, and the monsters being normal, which helps support Mythic Radiance search effect. However, the deck does have tendency to brick due to the high-level monsters run in tandem with the equip spells from the Spiral Mythic portion of the deck. Also, the deck can have trouble breaking an already established board, and there is the ever-present threat of anti-spell fragrance and the looming threat of those new rule changes that are coming with the link system, really hurting the advantage that pendulums can produce. Blue Eyes is a possibility with its support, Blue Eyes also being a high-powered normal monster, and plenty of other level 8 monsters to use with trade-in to increase deck speed to grab Mythic Radiance, with the potential for quality effect monster support when Mythic Radiance is not available. The problem with Blue Eyes is increased bricking potential, and too often effect monsters being on the field getting in the way of using your Whirlpool traps from the hand. Also, the lack of normal monsters that can be normal summoned easily puts pressure on Mythic Radiance token summoning effect to achieve the search portion of the effect. Obviously, level 4 normal monsters has the strengths of being able to trigger Mythic Radiance search effect almost every turn, as well as almost never interfering with hand activation conditions for the Whirlpool traps. However, I don't like the level 4 build as a standalone hybrid, because it is slow, and when you don't get Mythic Radiance early, the deck really struggles. In my opinion, the hybrid component for this deck must be able to carry the deck somewhat when Mythic Radiance is not on the field, but also provide a low level of interference with the effects and Whirlpool trap activation condition when Mythic Radiance is available. In my opinion, the best choice to achieve these attributes is Paleozoics. The trap aspect of Paleozoics do a fine job of producing field clearance and some increased speed thanks to Pikaia. The ability to summon Paleozoics from the graveyard as normal monsters trigger the search effect of Mythic Radiance, while also not interfering with Whirlpool's activation from the hand. Finally, the ability to make quality rank 2 plays when Paleozoics hit their monster form, like Totally Awesome, Sky Cavalry, and the Paleozoic specifics, can also provide significant field control and clearance. So for the Paleozoic aspect of the deck, I run 3 copies of Pikaia for draw power, 3 copies of Olenoides for spell trap removal, 3 copies of Dinomischus for on-field removal, for the discard is manageable due to all of the searching you have, and Deep Whirlpool's banish effect allowing you to take an equip spell from the graveyard and attach it to the field as if it were in your hand, 3 copies of Canadia for field control, and 2 copies of Hallucigenia for attack reduction. However, while the level 4 normal monster hybrid is too slow for my tastes to help by itself as a standalone hybrid, there's definitely room for some select choices, like running 3 copies of Kabazauls and 3 copies of Sabersaurus definitely makes sense. Both are normal level 4 monsters, strong attack, dinosaurs, opening the door to strong extra deck plays like the rank 4 Evolzars. And when Megalo Smasher X comes out, you can replace the Sabersaurs with Megalo Smasher, and now you have 2 sets of water monsters, so then you can access Water XZ monsters like number 37 Hope Wolf and Spider Shark. Finally, because of those 2 3-copy sets of level 4 normal monsters, it makes sense to run the 1 allowable copy of Rescue Rabbit. Closing out the remaining spells, I run 1 copy of Upstart Goblin for speed, and 3 copies of Terraforming for searching, because getting Mythic Radiance in your hand and then getting it onto the field is so incredibly important for the Spiral Mythic portion of the deck. And I run 1 copy of Instant Fusion for Norden summoning and additional extra deck playmaking when the field spell is not available or I need that extra push. While Card of Demise is certainly an option as well for this build, with only 9 monsters and the Spiral Mythics not really caring about being in the graveyard, in my experience I've found Demise getting in the way more often than I expected, because unlike most Paleozoic decks, this deck has a powerful damage output element associated with its Spiral Mythic summon, which often happens during your turn rather than your opponent's turn, thanks to your equip spells. For the extra deck, I run 1 copy of Elder Entity Norden, 1 number S39 Utopia the Lightning, 1 number 39 Utopia, 1 number 37 Hope Woven Spider Shark, 1 Evolzar Laggia, 1 Evolzar Dolkka, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Castel, 2 Paleozoic Anomalocaris, 2 Totally Awesome, 2 Sky Cavalry Centurias, and 1 Paleozoic Opabinias. In the end, this deck is basically an avalanche deck, in that if the field spell is on the field, it can overwhelm the opponent very quickly and completely. The Paleozoic component does a nice job of carrying the deck when needed and complementing the Spiral Mythic portion of the deck. One may argue that the deck on paper appears slow, but in actual play the deck is quick enough and provides such an effective level of control that despite the inability of the deck to produce +3, +4, +5, etc., which seem all the rage nowadays, the simple fact is it doesn't need to. Not surprisingly, due to all of the targeting-based elements, the worst matchup for this deck is Cosmos. Magispectors isn't much because it can just run them over typically, but fortunately, that is why side decks exist. Overall, when this deck comes out, it is reasonable to expect it to be competitive right out of the gate. Well, that is my Spiral Mythic Radiance Dragon deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.